Welcome to Creating Abundance with Alana Cahoon, sharing inspirational stories from experts around the world. Tap into your inner wisdom at alanacahoon.com. Welcome to Creating Abundance. I'm Alana Cahoon, and it is a pleasure to have with me today Barbara With, an international peace activist, award-winning author-publisher, psychic channel, composer and performer, workshop facilitator, and inspirational speaker. She is the co-founder of Conflict Revolution, a revolutionary way to resolve conflicts of the psyche, based on her work channeling none other than Albert Einstein. She has authored 6 books on metaphysics. Let us welcome Barbara With. Hello, Barbara.
Hi, so nice to meet you and so nice to be here today.
Likewise. So I'm always curious, where are you calling in from?
Right now I'm in a little town called Clyde St. George that's right outside of Exeter in the UK.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay, you're in the UK. I'm in Rochester, New York, USA. I'd love to start that with sunny Rochester, New York, but not today.
Can't count on the weather anymore.
Yeah. So tell us how you entered into this world of channeling and world peace. I'm all about bringing peace, both internally and externally, into our world, inner and outer.
My journey has been a bit of a convoluted one, and it started out with music, actually. I was a musician very, very young. I started playing piano when I was 5. I started writing songs when I was 13. And by the time I got out of high school, I went right out on the road. I had 2 full sets of original material, and I got myself into rock and roll. And all I ever wanted to be was a rock star. And but I say the process of writing music was really my introduction to channeling, because I would go into the nothing and listen for the song and then kind of pull it through. And also in high school, I started to see a woman who was a channel. We didn't call them channels back then, and it was so far back that we didn't even have portable recording devices. But she said she was an antenna, and she was just picking up my higher power and talking back to my human mind. And her information was really, I would, looking back, say it was all about self-love, which was something that I desperately needed at the time. And I studied with her for many years. So when I started to automatic write, sort of spontaneously, this was 1967, I knew what it was, but it was still kind of amazing to me that I could do this. And when I asked them, "Who are you?" and the answer was sound. And I thought, at that age, I've been working with sound my whole life. I'm okay with that, because I thought of being an antenna. So I did that for many years. And then in 1993, I wanted to do groups. I thought, what would this voice of sound say to a bunch of people? And some women were referred to me for readings back then, who kind of were a little group of their own. And Kim and Teresa were the 2 queen pins of the group. And so we got together in December of 1993, and I did my first channeling of a group with them. And that was the beginning of everything. And that work, when they asked in a reading, "Who are you?" they said, "You can call us angels."
Aww.
And I know you would think that would be a lovely thing, but I was kind of suspect. After all these years,
so.
Right? The whole thing about, they come disguised as angels or whatever. And
Sure.
But what these angels said to us was that they had this revolutionary way, they thought, to resolve conflict first within us, that was then going to lead to this byproduct of world peace. But they needed to test it. And we apparently had volunteered and were chosen to be the people to bring the message forth. Not just that, but then to take that information, and when we had our first fight, use it on the conflict.
Ah, how interesting.
Uh-huh. And it was such amazing work. We decided we didn't care if it was the Easter Bunny telling us this, that it was changing our lives so profoundly. And so we published our Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, Talking with the Angels. That was 1997. And it is the true story. And it's the transcripts from those master sessions. There are step-by-step instructions for world peace, one person at a time, starting with ourselves. And I started teaching conflict revolution, we called it, in 1999. And we called it revolution not only because it was really revolutionary, what was happening when we would do this. So, for example, after our first conflict, where we got out the transcript and had this sort of aha moment where we all shifted from pointing our finger at each other to coming to the table and saying, okay, here's what I can do. And then Kim would say, okay, and here's what I can do.
Yeah.
What happened for me was that night I was playing a gig in Minneapolis at this hotel, and there was a particular waitress who wanted nothing to do with me. She was as cold as ice. I'd played at this place for 2 years, and she never said a word to me. She just was cold. I walked in that night. She could not get enough of me. She wanted to give me Patti Smith tapes. She seeded my tip jar with $20. She just talked and talked and talked to me. And I realized this is what happens when we change within. It naturally manifests differently without. It's nothing I could have gone at her to say, hey, how come you don't like me, or any of that. So with that basis, I created this workshop called Conflict Revolution and began training in 1999. And back then I was doing it at a women's economic development organization in St. Paul, where I worked for women in the trades, anger management, personal empowerment, because it's kind of all the same. Once you get your insides aligned, you can deal with all that. So I got ourselves a literary agent to see if we could shop our book to a bigger publisher. And she called me one day in 1998 and said, there's a tabloid in London. It's like a paranormal tabloid, who are looking for an interview with Princess Diana on the 1-year anniversary of her death. And again, the skeptic that I am is like, really? What is this? Because I had discovered that I could communicate with people who had passed on.
Right.
But they were coming to me.
Yeah.
And trying to get information to their living loved ones. So I never had done this. And I thought, is this even kosher to, like, is it exploitative? But I decided to do the interview, and I sat down and I typed everything. So I typed the questions, I typed the answers. So the questions were channeled as well, because I didn't know what I was going to ask her. And I typed it out and I read it, and it was not only phenomenal in the level of detail about her relationship with Dodie and what went on that night, and her children and what they were going to become, which they then did. Yeah. But her big message was, if everyone who left flowers at the palace would make peace within, we would have world peace. And I thought, this is brilliant. Get this into a tabloid where you get 10 million, 40 million people. How many people can you inspire to be the peace?
So did they publish your
They
work?
did not. They flew me out to New York and spent 5 hours with me.
Yeah.
But in the end, I believe it's because she did not mention Camilla or Charles once.
All right, I have to just pause here because you've just shared so much that I love it. I love it. This is so much fun. First, I'm going to back up. I didn't realize that you were a songwriter, singer, performer, because that's how I started.
Really?
Yeah. I always, I have a degree in theater, and I spent 10 years in New York City as a singer, songwriter, and actress.
I'm jealous.
But I never pieced together that spiritual outlet, because as I wrote music, I never had to work at it. Writing a song, it was this beautiful melody would fill me, the words would pour out of me, and before I knew it, I had a song.
Exactly.
So I wrote many, many songs for years. And so again, and we shared this. I'm a mystic intuitive. Another way that feels good to me to say very similar things about channeling and communicating with the spirit world, and I love that you used skepticism, but I like to say, just as I've used this, I remember taking a meditation class back in the 80s in New York, because I was wide open to the spirit world and I didn't know what to do with it. And this teacher said, "Well, if a stranger comes to your door, are you going to let him in?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, then why would you let a strange spirit into your home or your space?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's a really good idea. That's a really good question." So that started the process of me being discerning. And my daily meditation always starts with communicating with the sacred, the divine God, goddess. So, I think as we move into this world, we learn the relevance and importance of that, of working with the divine and the sacred. And I did notice that one of your books is about Christ consciousness and bringing that divine light within. It's not just the external Jesus, but it's that beautiful communion within, and knowing that that burning flame is in each and every one of us, and that's really touching in there is that inner peace. I'm going to give this right back to you in one moment, but you've inspired me with so many wonderful nuggets there. And it's that inner peace. It's always working within to then everything in our lives is a reflection of ourselves. And that has been probably my hardest lesson in life, but it's starting to make sense. Right? It makes sense. We do create our reality. So the more peace we can cultivate within ourselves, then the more peace we're going to generate and bring out in people like the waitress. So I know you've got so much more, but I'm wondering, how then did you end up? What are you doing in the UK now?
Well, I left home on October 15th. I live in Lake Superior on a small island, and I decided to go just on a peace tour, a world peace tour. I turned 69 this year, and I decided that I have this incredible body of knowledge, and I am a walking encyclopedia of it. And so I want to get it out into the world and be guided. And so that's what I've been doing. And in the UK, I decided to pet sit my way across the UK as a way to provide housing for my World Peace Tour. So here I am in Exeter with 4 Labradors. And everywhere I go, people want to talk about peace. People want to know, what are we going to do? How can we do this? It's just so encouraging.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I interviewed another author the other day, Donna Maltz, known as Donna Mama, and she's growing her hair, and she said she won't stop growing her hair until there's world peace.
I should do that. I used to have hair.
Yeah, it's essential. And there's something about, I think personally, that the feminine nature may very well be that essence and energy that creates the world peace.
Yes. And when we get into the conflict revolution, I'll show you how that fits into. So
let's go into it. Let's hear all about it. I'm so curious.
Well, let me just quickly introduce Einstein, because he's such an important part of this conversation. So after they didn't want our interview with Princess Di, my agent and I made this list of famous people. We thought maybe there's other famous people who want to talk. We had no idea really what we were doing, but we'd go to them, and Mother Teresa was tired, and Gandhi said it all, and so Nicole Brown Simpson came up. And that is also a profoundly fascinating interview about the impact of racism and the abuse that she took in her own life. But when we got to John Kennedy, he said, "This is not your idea. This is our idea. And we're going to tell you who's up next in the queue." Oh. And so Next was Jackie O, and all of these personalities were covering aspects of culture. So Jackie O was about publishing, and then Einstein came up, and we didn't even have him on our list. Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love him? But I'm not a scientist or a mathematician, but when I channeled him verbally. This was the voice of my channeling. This was an ancient a kind of reverberation within me. This was sound. Yeah. And this went as far back as my songwriting when I was very young. Mm-hmm. And that interview, again, was mind-blowing, revolutionary. He said so many incredible things. Stuff like ADHD is really a kind of a ailment of the parent in children, because you're trying to force these kids to sit in a desk for 8 hours. And just little simple things. And so in 2005, I decided I wanted to do a little volume just for him. Let's see what he would say all by himself. And what happened was he delivered to me a unified field theory, which he could not do in real life, which is how things operate on the microcosm in the same way that they do in the macrocosm. And it included a map of human consciousness that explained how human consciousness interacts with energy in order to manifest the physical world. Oh, wow. And then he gave us a scientific, quantifiable definition of compassion as the fifth fundamental force of the universe, the creative intelligence that uses the four fundamental forces to impel the creation of the universe one step at a time.
I'm getting tingles. Compassion. That's it. That's the answer. So tell us. I want you to tell us more, but also this information is in one of your books or several books. Yeah.
Party of 12, the afterlife interviews. That's all the interviews with the people. And then Imagining Einstein, Essays on M Theory, World Peace, and the Science of Compassion was my next book. And that was the book that got me first traveling all around the world, teaching and training and channeling and singing. And then I did after all of those years, I think in 2016, I published Einstein et al., Manifestation, Conflict Revolution, and the New Operating System. That's really the complete definitive explanation of the unified field theory, complete with illustrations. And then at the end, it's conflict revolution and how to work conflict revolution. And this is all his theory of why conflict revolution works like it does. Why, when we align here to compassion, as we call it, that we naturally manifest in the physical world. And all of that is so profound. And it took me a long time to process that information. So in 2005, he said, the center of the source of everything is the center of the earth. And it operates like a black hole. And at the time, I was like, okay, so I have to go out in the world and tell the world that the center of the planet is like a black hole. I don't even know, I don't know science. I just want to be a rock star. But now I hear Brian Greene, a famous string theorist. You can look it up on YouTube, Science Time. He explains why it is the black hole is probably what's creating our whole reality. So it's been proven through the years, but it's taken a while to do that. So yeah, that's how he came in here. And then when I started training conflict revolution in 1999, it was very simple. It wasn't what it turned into, explaining step by step how the physical world is created and how when we master this inner world, we change the manifestations in the outer world. So it really has stayed true to its roots, but it's just continued to expand in its evolutionary explanation.
That's beautiful. That's really wonderful. So I'm curious. So you've said that you go out and you teach this to professionals. And how is that received?
To everyone.
To everyone. Mm-hmm.
It's, I have to say that when we started this in the 90s, world peace was kind of a nice idea. And people, I would say probably 20% of my workshops had their big aha moment where they got it, like tingles. And another 40% thought, wow, this is really profound. And then the rest of them were like, now there's probably about 100% of the people who have their aha moment and get how to work the process and how it changes and transforms their lives. So, yeah, it's really and whether or not you continue to study the very specific steps of conflict resolution, I think the process is, because it is a unified field. It's everything. It's the theory of everything. So you're going to find everything that you do on those maps. You're going to see all the processes you do in that process. And I think that's what's so profound to me about it, is that it does enhance absolutely everyone's processes by showing them this bigger, incredible root of everything.
That's awesome. So I have a question. How does just being you, being this magnificent, magnetic human being, how does this affect your relationships in your life, your friendships, your partnerships, etc.? How does this? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, through the years, I have used this process to heal my life. Mm-hmm. And I had particularly a long stretch, several years, where I was really taken with some mental health issues because this was all too much. I left my husband, I left my home to launch this work, and I had to use it. And it took me a while, but in the process of aligning myself to compassion, and we'll get into the divine feminine, which is the driving force of conflict resolution, in the form of intuition, I learned how to self-love. And I learned how, when my intuition says no, then my intellect, which is where free will decision-making process actually takes place. We don't make decisions with our heart or our intuition. Intuition will impel us to take the next most advantageous step for the good of the whole situation, starting with ourselves. Yes. But intellect has been given the power to say no and to act differently than what intuition tells us. Mm-hmm. And Einstein says that conflict between the divine feminine, which is intuition, and the divine masculine, which is intellect, is where all of the conflicts that manifest in the world are rooted. That is the root. Mm. And so I learned how to train my intellect to listen to my intuition, to trust my intuition, and to act on my intuition. And that affected all of my relationships, because I had so many relationships, like we all do, where we say yes to them when we know we should not be saying yes to those people, but we say yes to them because our intellects will talk us, well, you can't, they're going to think you're this, so that's, I have to be a good person, blah, blah, blah. And what it's done is, not only has it reduced external conflict in my life in relationships by a good, I always say 87%, because when I resolve it here, I don't have to have the drama out here to act it out and work it out in here. Yeah. But then it's people, when you get the aha moment, when you revolve your focus back to see where your conflict is and you resolve it here, I always say either the people disappear or they rise to the occasion.
Oh, so, that's good.
Yeah, that's really what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that in my own life. That's really great. It's very interesting. Yeah, as we raise our own vibrations, then people are going to either rise alongside us or not. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's part of evolution. Yeah, it's it's a strange metaphor what I'm going to use, but for some people who are listening, if you are elevating your career path and you move from a manager from managing 20 people to, let's say, managing 100 or 1,000, you shift your vibration, you have more responsibility, etc., and the relationships are going to change. People are going to see you differently and feel that there's a power, there's a confidence. uh, doesn't mean you're not full of compassion and love, but there's a new sense of responsibility as well. And I think that's and maybe that's a question, as someone who can channel this wisdom and knowledge uh, from, thank goodness you're being able to collect this and then share it with the rest of the world. Do you feel a sense of responsibility? And what is that? How does, yeah, what does that even mean to you as I say that?
It's interesting you ask that, because I've been going through a revolution right now. Because this is what I do in my life. It's not like I've resolved all my conflict and now I'm just this. I have to employ these techniques in this crazy world that we're living in. And I'm also an investigative reporter. I have been for about 12 years. I started the Wisconsin Citizens Media Cooperative. And so I'm doing right now a series about propaganda and what it does to our brains, and how in fact, I just finished my next post today about how conflict revolution breaks us from propaganda, because it works on the propaganda of the intellect that says you're not good enough, or you can't do this, or they're to blame. It teaches us how to revolve that and take responsibility and transform it. So for the past, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, I found myself going deeper and deeper and deeper into this kind of depressive state and this hopelessness. Now, I'm somebody who can read the headlines of everything and not get sucked down, but I was finding myself being triggered by these people who were just spewing propaganda and spewing lies as if it was truth. And I knew, it's a process. It's like, okay, when are you going to revolve it? When are you going to revolve it? And so I finally did. And I found, when I started to go, okay, where am I indoctrinated? Where am I, and the ego is going to go right away. Well, I'm a critical thinker. It's like, no, if you are triggered, you need to take this in. And then when I was doing that work, I was divinely guided to a woman named Tanya. I did her podcast, and she turned me on to Dr. Michael Nels, who wrote a book called The Indoctrinated Brain. And as I read this book, and it talked about how the brain produces these nerves that give us memory, and that he wrote a book called The Unified Field of Alzheimer's, saying that Alzheimer's is not something that happens to us when we grow old. It's because our hippocampus is not producing those nerves that allow us to retain a memory. And what happens is, in the terms of propaganda, and what for me was that I was forgetting how powerful I am. I was forgetting all the times that I've manifested in my life, incredible, magnificent, miraculous manifestations. And it explained to me what was happening to me, so that to a point where then I could say, oh, wait a minute. And he gave a very clear, simple way to, break the pattern. But for me, it was about, because he said fear stops the hippocampus from producing these nerves. But I say, and I want to talk to him about this, it isn't just the emotion of fear, because in our world, there's 3 human dimensions, they're like human organs: emotion, intuition, and intellect. And they work together, and they each have their own function. And so when emotion, like depression or anxiety, whatever, flows up the wave, and it hits intuition that will tell us to feel and breathe, or whatever is good for the whole. It's when those emotions marry to those thoughts and become that reality, that's where I think it hits the hippocampus and stops the production of that of the nerves that we need. So when we break that, we don't want to stop feeling and breathing all of the emotion. We want the unified field of emotion to move through our system, but we want to redirect it so it marries itself to other thoughts. And it's basically what he was saying, but not quite in that detailed way.
Can you give us an example of that? Like just like a tangible example of having a feeling and this feeling moves to the intuition and then it just what you said.
Well, I had a conflict once, very briefly. I had a boss who I was in property management, and he never got cleaning help. So every time the place needed cleaning, I had to be the one to go clean, and I had this bad shoulder and this bad back, and so the emotion of frustration and anger would rise up, and it would marry to this thought that my boss doesn't care about me. He doesn't care one bit about me. He's lying to me. He keeps saying that he's going to get help. And I was stuck in that. And so when I finally said, okay, let's revolve it. Okay, so he doesn't care about your physical feelings and he lies. All right, I'm going to revolve it around. You don't care about your physical condition and you lie. And of course, the intellect and the ego goes, wait a minute, I've been to the chiropractor and I've done this and that. But I knew there's something. And it turned out that I was having this revolution where I was feeling and breathing the anger. And I kept blaming him. And I went out, I had to clean this house. And I was even mad. And it was in mid window wash when I was watching myself use the arm that I claimed he didn't care about to do the work that I said I wasn't going to do.
Yeah.
So there I was, the liar who wasn't taking care of my body.
Okay.
And so when I stopped and said, okay, intuition, what should I do? And the answer was, make yourself heard. So I drove back into town. I took him out of the office. I sat him down and I said, look, I have been lying to you. I say I'm not going to clean and I clean every time. It's over. You find somebody, or I'm going to give the people your phone number when they get there and the house is dirty. And he's like, okay. And we walked back to the office, and Ileana walked in the office and said, I hear you need a maid. And it was never an issue again. And that revolution, though, led to a lot of other changes in my life that I didn't anticipate. Yeah. Because I had to stop lying to myself about a number of things, including my marriage. And I still love my ex-husband. We are very, very, very good friends. But we weren't meant at that point. We were distracting each other from, we wanted to go different directions. So it leads to other realizations when you stop to really take care of yourself.
Self-care equals empowerment. That's my new motto. That's very helpful. And it's a reminder also that blame never, ever serves, and to release that blame and to go, it just, when you let go of blaming someone else and then say, okay, how am I feeling? What are my feelings around this? How do I shift that? Oh, by speaking up, by saying, creating a boundary. I'm not going to do this anymore. I said I wasn't going to, and yet here I am. Yeah, so that's really cool. I just love everything that you've been sharing. Let's see, one other question. I think I'm curious. When do you have a meditation practice? And before you begin the act of channeling, what do you have a process, or what's?
I don't have a complicated meditation practice. I have small things that I do meditatively that mostly involve feeling and breathing. So that, like, when I wake up in the middle of the night and there's anxiety or what have you, I do box breathing. And then we step into our witness so that we can observe what we're thinking, what intuition is telling us, and what emotion is there. And what I love about this work is that it's something that I do all day, every day. I am witnessing myself. I know that when there's a trigger, here's what I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I do start the day every day religiously with my gratitude. Thank you for another day of the most miraculous life I ever could have dreamt up. And I fully intend to make this the most magical, mystical, miraculous manifestation of a day that I possibly can. And before I channel, I have a little prayer that I say. But honestly, at this point in my life, and especially after studying this science, the science of compassion and the maps and how things work, I feel very plugged into that map most of the time. Mm-hmm. So it's not that I'm bombarded by entities or Einstein's always bugging me, but I'm always aware that there's this bigger picture going on, and that I'm then painfully aware of when I'm not aligning myself to compassion, and I have these processes to get myself back on track.
Well, this is just beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And could you just share with our listeners how they can follow up with you, reach you, maybe listen to or get your books, etc.?
Yes, synergyalliance.llc is the big website with absolutely everything on it. And the book that you mentioned, Second Coming, Awakening the Christ Within, that's my psychic sorority sister, Kimberly Phelps. That's her book, but all my books are there. BarbaraWith.com is my own personal website. It also has my journalism and my work with propaganda going on there. And if your listeners want to reach out to me at Barbara With, just go to the contact information and say, I heard you on Alana's show. I'll happily offer a 20% off of a reading if they'd like to have one. And Barb With, BARBWITH, that's my music website. Oh. And my YouTube channel, which is Barb With as well, I have hundreds of channelings and sessions that I've done through the years on that. And if you wanted to go to partyof12.com, it's not officially retired, but I probably started that in 2008. Yeah. And there's just hundreds and hundreds of channels and sessions. And wow. Yeah, so awesome. It's all there. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. So contact information is in the show notes. Please go ahead, visit, follow, like the session, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Creating Abundance podcast. Until then, Namaste. Thank you for listening to Creating Abundance. Be sure to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next podcast and get your free ebook at alanacahoon.com/ebook.